The very first step before using the Pi is to flash an operating system on the SD card you have and to do some configuration. In this lesson, I will show you how you can easily install the Raspberry Pi operating system on your micro SD card, but also how to set up the Wi-Fi and an SSH connection so we can get access to the Pi for further configuration. So to install Raspberry Pi OS, the first thing you do is you go on raspberrypi.org, okay, you have the URL, and then you can click on software, okay, and you're gonna get this page or something that is maybe similar, okay, and you're gonna have here install Raspberry Pi OS using Raspberry Pi Imager. So we are going to download the Raspberry Pi Imager, which is a software that is going to do everything for us. So that's gonna make our life simpler. So you can click here on download for Windows if you're on Windows currently, or macOS or Ubuntu, okay? I'm gonna download for Windows. Okay, so I'm going to save the file, and once it's done, I'm going to install the Raspberry Pi Imager. Okay, so you click on yes if you have a pop-up, and then click on install. Okay, finish. And if you want to find it easily, well, you just type Raspberry Pi Imager on your bar here at the bottom and just find the application here, or maybe it's on your desktop. Okay, so once you're here, I'm gonna close that. Once you're here, you're gonna first choose an operating system that you're gonna flash in the SD card, okay? And you're gonna choose the first one, okay? Raspberry Pi OS here. So just choose the first one. You can see you have many different ones, okay? For example, here you can choose, well, you can see many different operating systems, but we're going to go with the main one, Raspberry Pi OS, which was previously named Raspbian. Okay, so if you are looking into installing Raspbian, well, that's now the new name, Raspberry Pi OS. And then what you are going to do, so I'm going to physically put my SD card in the computer. Okay, maybe that's gonna open something like this. Well, you don't care about that, okay? You just close the windows. Okay, you can see I already have stuff on that. I'm going to just close, and I'm not going to format anything for now. Okay, and I'm going to click on choose storage and choose the SD card here, and you have the SD card. And one more thing I'm going to do now, and this is a configuration that you can't see on the screen. I'm going to need to use a shortcut, Control Shift and X. Okay, so you do Control Shift and X, and you see we have a new window here with more configuration. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Enable SSH, and we are going to use password authentication with the password for the Pi user, which is Raspberry. So you can just type Raspberry here, okay, to set the password for the Pi user. That's the default password. And then you can go down, and you are going to click also on Configure Wi-Fi. And this maybe is going to show you the current Wi-Fi you're connected in. So make sure that, well, here I'm on Windows. You can see I have named my network Your Wi-Fi Network, okay, for simplicity for this course. And the password is, for me, your password. Okay, so you just replace that. And so those values have to be the same ones you are using here for your computer, okay? So that then you can access the Raspberry Pi from your computer because you are gonna be in the same network. Okay, and well, that's okay. So you can click on save, and then you can click on write. But before you do that, make sure the SD card doesn't contain anything that you want it to keep, because once you click on write, that's going to erase everything. So you click on write, okay, everything will be erased. Are you sure? Yes. And then it's going to download the operating system. So you can click on cancel if you need to. And it's going to download the Raspberry Pi operating system. If it's already downloaded before, it's going to keep it and retrieve it from the cache. And then it's going to write it inside the SD card. And then you can wait until it's done, and that's going to take a few minutes. Okay, and once it is done, well, if you have any of that, you can just click on OK, cancel, OK. Just don't click on format anything. And then you can see successfully written, okay, on SD card. Continue. And then what you can do is remove the SD card from your computer. And well, that's it. Now you will be able to boot your Raspberry Pi with the Raspberry Pi operating system. With the configuration from the last step on boot, your Raspberry Pi should automatically try to connect to the Wi-Fi network you've provided. So what you can do now is first make sure that your Raspberry Pi is powered off. Okay, this is very important. Now you can put the SD card in the SD card slot of the Pi. Okay, make sure it is correctly inside the slot, like you can see here on the screen. And then and only then you can power on your Raspberry Pi. So what you should see is first you will have the red LED, which should be powered on, and then you should also see just next to it the green LED blinking quite randomly. And if it's blinking randomly, it means simply that the Raspberry Pi is booting, and so you can wait a little bit, and after a few seconds, maybe 1 minute top, the Raspberry Pi should be connected to your Wi-Fi network. And now that is where we need to actually find the IP address of this Raspberry Pi on the network so we can get access to it. So to find the IP address, we are going to use a tool. Okay, this is another software you can download. Here I'm using the Angry IP Scanner. Okay, so this tool is quite good to find all the IP addresses and hosts inside a network. So I've chosen this one because simply it's available for Windows, Mac or Linux, so anyone can use it with this course. You may have already used some specific software. For example, for Windows you have Advanced IP Scanner, which is as good as Angry IP Scanner, even better. So if you already know other IP Scanner softwares for your operating system, feel free to use them. And if you are going to use Angry IP Scanner as I'm doing here, you can simply here, you can click on that and download and install the software just like you would install any software. And you will also have to install Java here because the software uses Java. So you can click on here and just download and install the latest version here. Okay, so you have to install Java plus this software. And if you are using Mac OS, you have the instructions here, and Linux, you have the instructions here. And now that the software is installed, well, you simply have to start it. And you may have another pop-up asking you to accept some stuff related to the network. And so you have to press yes. Okay, so otherwise it will not work. So you have this software started, and before we even do anything, please go back to check your Wi-Fi network here and make sure that your laptop, so this laptop over there, is connected to the same Wi-Fi network as the Raspberry Pi, so as the configuration you have set up inside the SD card of the Raspberry Pi. Okay, if it's not in the same network, you will never be able to find the Raspberry Pi from this computer. So this is actually the very important first step you need to check here. So once this is done, well, go back to Angry IP Scanner, and before we press start, we have a little bit of configuration here. So as you can see, we have the hostname. The hostname is actually the hostname of this machine here, so that is my hostname. It will be different for you, and you are going to click on that IP button with an arrow here. So you click on that and you will see different stuff here. So you may have just one or two or more, like me, and you're going to select the one with Wi-Fi here. So this is actually this is the IP address of that computer in the Wi-Fi network. I have a few other ones here, for example, with virtual machines, but if I chose them, I will not be able to connect to the Raspberry Pi because it's not the same network. So I have to choose the Wi-Fi IP address, and as you can see, this will automatically update the IP range here. Okay, and what you're going to do is actually, so you have 4 different numbers for an IP address. You're going to change the last one here for the beginning of the range to let's say 1, and the last one here to 255. So when you will scan, this will scan between 1 and 255 in that network here, and your Raspberry Pi is somewhere between those two numbers. So when you scan, you will see the IP address, the host name, and the port. But one thing actually you can do is also click on that, okay? And we are going to add the MAC vendor here. I will show you why later. So you click on MAC vendor, you put add here, so it should be on the left, and you click on OK. So it should be here, that column should be here. And now just press start. Okay, and once this is done, you will have that kind of window message. So for me it took 30 seconds, it can take more or less time. So you can click on close, and you have, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. until 255. So what you can do is simply maybe click on ping and sort by ping, so you have all of the different IP address which are actually corresponding to real machines, okay? So when it's blue, there is something. When it's red, it means that nothing has been detected for this IP address. So we can see that actually that is the first one here. This is the laptop I'm using here, and I can see here the IP address finishing with 56 for me. So it, of course, this can be completely different for you. It can be a completely different number here. I can see a MAC vendor here, Raspberry Pi trading. So it means I have found my Raspberry Pi on the network. Okay, and the reason I have asked you to add the MAC vendor here is because, well, for some reason, it depends. Sometimes you may not be able to see the host name, which should be Raspberry Pi. So if you use, for example, the advanced IP scanner software on Windows, you will see the host name, but not with Angry IP Scanner. I mean, at least not for my specific situation. So here you can clearly see that this is the Raspberry Pi you're looking for. If you don't have any information here, you can still guess by looking at the blue dots here, because you will only have a few. Okay, so this is my computer. The first one will not be Raspberry Pi. It will not finish with a 1. So here, even if I didn't have that, I could guess that this would be the Raspberry Pi IP address. Great, you've successfully installed the Raspberry Pi operating system, configured the Wi-Fi, and you know the IP address of the Raspberry Pi in the network. What we can do now is to use SSH to take control over the Raspberry Pi and really get access to it. So first of all, I'm going to open a file explorer here and go to my main partition here, go to users, to select your username, okay? And here you may see a .ssh folder here. If you don't see it, well, you have nothing to do and you can just skip the next 20 seconds or so. If you have an SSH folder, you're going to go inside and you may have a known hosts file. What you can do is, if you don't know SSH or stuff, you can just simply remove that file for now. It may prevent some errors when you try to connect to your Raspberry Pi. Okay, and now what you can do is to open a terminal, okay? So Windows key and then CMD or command, and click on that, and this will open a terminal on Windows. So if you are using Linux, I guess you know how to use a terminal, and if you're using Mac, you can also open a new terminal, okay? And if you're using Windows 10, okay, Windows 10 with a quite recently updated version, you can simply connect to the Raspberry Pi with SSH on the terminal. So you can easily check if you have SSH available for you on Windows 10. Okay, simply you can type SSH on the terminal and press enter. Okay, here I have a message usage
SSH. So if you have that, it means you have SSH and you don't need to do anything else. If you don't have that, and if instead you have a message like SSH command not found, then it means you won't be able to use SSH in the Windows terminal. So in that case, in that very specific case on Windows, you would need to install another software to use SSH, and you can, for example, use PuTTY. So you can go on putty.org and you can simply download it, install the software, and then start it. So PuTTY is an SSH client. You can use it the same way we are going to use this command line here. This will just make you use a GUI tool, so you will have to fill up the IP address, the username, and the password, as we are going to do here. So coming back to the terminal, what you can do to get access to your Raspberry Pi is to type SSH and then space, and then you need to provide the username. So what is the username for Raspberry Pi, for your Raspberry Pi? Well, the default username that is already here when you flash the OS into the card is named simply Pi, okay? So there is no way for you to discover that. It's simply the default one that I'm giving it to you here. You can also find it on the Raspberry Pi website. So we are going to be connected as the user named Pi. Then you can put @ and the IP address that you found here with your IP scanner software. So for me, it will be 192.168.43.56. So of course that will be different for you, okay? So just use the IP address you found there, and then you can simply press enter, okay? For the very first connection, you will have that message. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? Because actually the host here, your machine doesn't know, has not been connected to your Raspberry Pi before, so you can just press yes, okay? And now it's asking you for the password, okay? So we have the user Pi and we need to give the password. So what is the password? Well, the password is simply Raspberry, okay? Like that, no uppercase, no space, no nothing, just Raspberry like that. So you can go ahead and type Raspberry. You will not see anything, okay? As you can see when I typed, you will not see anything written on the screen. And then you press enter. And if it works, if you've provided the correct password, then you're in. You can see here you have the Pi user, and then the hostname is Raspberry Pi, and you are connected to the Raspberry Pi for the first time. Great. Let's now install and configure VNC. VNC will simply allow you to use the Raspberry Pi desktop from your own computer. This is great, so you don't need to only use the terminal with command lines, and you also don't need to have a monitor plugged to your Raspberry Pi. And even if you have a monitor, you will see that it's sometimes more convenient to work without it. So the reason why we set up SSH just before is simply because we need to access the Raspberry Pi through SSH, so we can actually set up VNC. So that's what we are going to do here. So SSH, then you put the username, which is Pi here, @ and the IP address. So of course, this will be different for you. Okay, press enter, and the password is still Raspberry. Okay, don't worry about the warning message here about password. We are just going to change the password later. So here, to enable VNC and make it work correctly, there are a few different steps that we need to do in the order, so please follow along. First, you are going to type, so here you are in a terminal inside the Raspberry Pi, you are going to type sudo space raspi-config, okay? And if you see that, for example, if I press tab here, I can have the auto-completion to make sure it is the right command. So sudo will make you run the command as an administrator on the machine, which is required here. and raspi config is just so you can get access to the configuration. So you press enter,
and it will bring you to that menu here, so you can navigate using the arrows, okay, from your keyboard. It's very simple, and then just press enter to choose whatever you want. And the first thing we are going to do is go to interface options, okay, press enter, and then go to VNC, press enter again. And would you like the VNC server to be enabled? You're gonna select yes, press enter, and you can see the VNC server is enabled. So I'm going to use the right arrow, okay, to go to select and then finish, and then press enter on finish. And I am going to reboot the Raspberry Pi with the command sudo reboot. So you do sudo reboot, enter, and you can see now, so the Raspberry Pi is rebooting, and we are back to where we were before. So here I'm back on Windows, okay. I lost the connection to the Raspberry Pi, okay, because of course it's rebooting. So now you have to wait, okay, a few seconds until the Raspberry Pi has boot again and is connected to the Wi-Fi network, okay. I'm going to use the same command as before and wait a bit and then press enter. And you can see when you have the password, it means that the Raspberry Pi has correctly rebooted. So you just put the password Raspberry once more, and you are back to SSH, okay, on the Raspberry Pi with the Pi user. And now you are going to go back to raspi config, okay, with sudo raspi config. And so here the VNC server is enabled, but that's not going to just work like that. So you need to go here. We are in 1, so I'm going to press enter, okay, and go to boot autologging. And I'm going to choose, so by default, that may be one of those, okay, console, but you're gonna choose desktop or desktop autologging, okay? So it means that it's gonna boot on the desktop. And if you use autologging, it's gonna boot on the desktop and it's not gonna ask you for the password to boot. Okay, so I'm going to use that because it's just simpler. So I press enter. Okay, and then what I can do is I can just go to finish again. Would you like to reboot now? Okay, they ask you that because you have changed an option that needs a reboot. So do you like to reboot now? Yes, you press yes, and it's going to reboot again. Okay, so I'm going to make the steps one by one, okay, and reboot every time so that you can see each step, okay, one by one. So now you have to wait a bit until the Raspberry Pi has reboot. So I put the password Raspberry again. Okay, and I'm going back to raspi config, and the last step, we are going to go on display options, okay, and resolution. Okay, and you're gonna choose a different screen resolution than the default one, okay, because for some reasons, if you have the default resolution, the VNC server may not work, so you have to choose a different resolution here. And which one to choose? Well, basically choose the one that corresponds to your current screen here. So on my laptop here, I have a full HD resolution on the screen, so I'm going to choose the full HD resolution. Okay, so you press enter on the resolution you want. Okay, the resolution is set, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then go back to finish. Would you like to reboot now? And yes, and you reboot one more time.
Okay, so those are the 3 steps we need to do so we can enable VNC and make it work. So now we have set up VNC on the Raspberry Pi. So this is the server side. What we need to do now is to get the client. So here I'm using Windows. I need to get a client so I can actually connect to the Raspberry Pi and get access to the desktop. And to do that, we are going to actually install the real VNC viewer, okay? So you can go to that URL here, realvnc.com. You can simply also type VNC viewer, real VNC, and it's basically the first link. And as you can see, this is multi-platform, so you can choose whatever OS you're using right now, Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. As you can see, there is a Raspberry Pi here, but don't mix things up, okay? If you choose this is the client to connect to the Raspberry Pi. So if you choose this, basically it means that you are controlling a Raspberry Pi from another Raspberry Pi, okay? Here we are controlling the Raspberry Pi from Windows here because my laptop is running Windows at the moment. So I'm going to choose the Windows client and simply download it. Okay, save it, and when it is done, you can, okay, I already downloaded it before, so you can just run it and go through the installation setup. And once it is installed, you simply have to launch the application, okay, and you will get that view here. So what are we going to do now? First, make sure that your Raspberry Pi has been rebooted, so it is powered on, it is running, and also make sure that here I'm going back to my network configuration. You should have the correct configuration because you could just previously connect to SSH, but make sure you always have your computer and your Raspberry Pi on the same network, otherwise you won't be able to connect to the Raspberry Pi from your laptop. So now I'm going to go here to File and New Connection, or you can just press Ctrl N if you want. And here I'm going to put the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so really make sure that you note that somewhere so you don't forget it. And I'm giving a name. This is just a name so we can recognize the connection here. Just Raspberry Pi. You can put whatever name you want here, okay? And let's click on OK. And now I'm going to double click on that. Okay, you may have a warning like that, and don't worry about that. Let's click on continue. If you don't have the warning, it's fine too. And now you have to give the username and password. So the username here is Pi and the password is Raspberry. Okay, just like we did for SSH, okay? You can choose to remember the password or not. I'm not going to do that now because we are going to change the password later. Okay, you can now have access to your Raspberry Pi desktop without any external monitor. So first, okay, you may have that warning. SSH is enabled and the default password for the Pi user has not been changed. So you will only get that, of course, if you have previously set SSH like we did. Just click on OK, it doesn't matter. And you have the welcome screen to set everything up. So I'm just going to guide you through the different steps here. Click on next. So you choose your country, and for example, for me, it is France. Okay, choose language. I'm going to use the English language, so you can just also set your keyboard or anything that is related to your country. Okay, next. Okay, and here they will ask you to enter a new password. So we could have done that before, but because we have this option to do that here, I didn't do it before, so we can just change the password now. So simply choose a password that you want, and that will become the new password for the Pi user. Okay, so your user is still named Pi, okay, but then the password will not be Raspberry anymore. The password will be the password that you set here. Okay, so make sure that you remember the password after you set it here. Then you click on next. If the screen shows a black border around the desktop, you can click on that. For me, in my situation, I don't have the black border, so I'm just going to click on next. And then they will search for wireless network. So if it is the first time you boot your Raspberry Pi with an external monitor, of course here you have to choose which network you want to connect to and set up provide the password. Here I'm not going to do that because I'm already connected to that network, because that's what we previously did in another step. So I'm going to click on skip here, but you can click on next if you're not connected. And update software, you can click on next. Okay, it will check for updates. So after fetching the new available update, it will download the new packages, so we can install the packages. It may take some time here depending on your internet connection speed. And after all the updates have been downloaded, now the Raspberry Pi will install those updates. So here again, you have to wait a few minutes. Okay, and finally, you will get this message, system is up to date. So you click on OK, and now the setup is complete. So you can actually press restart. And as you can see, when I press restart here, because I'm using VNC, I get a message attempting to reconnect to VNC server. Okay, because of course the Raspberry Pi now is shutting down, so the VNC client can't connect to the VNC server. So what you can do here, you just need to wait, okay? If the Raspberry Pi is disconnected, the VNC client will continue to try to connect to the Raspberry Pi, and when the Raspberry Pi will boot again, it will enable the VNC server and the client will be able to connect. And here, as you can see, we have a message. Either the username was not recognized or the password was incorrect. And you get this in the first time because the password, actually you have changed the password. Okay, the password is not Raspberry anymore. The password is the new password that you have set. So you click on OK, and you can now double click on the VNC client again, and you can put your new password. Okay, and there you can actually click on remember password. Click on OK, and it will connect again as the user Pi. Okay, so now if I click here, I close it, I can connect again, and it will not ask for the password. And one thing that you may experience is, okay, if I try to put full screen, as you can see, it doesn't really work. Okay, it's not good. As you can see, the resolution is not really updated correctly. Okay, it's either too big or not fitting the screen. So to fix that, simply follow what I'm doing here. You can click here to open a terminal. So you can use the command sudo and then nano, okay, nano, which is a text editor, and then /boot/ config.txt. Okay, so you can just type this exact command and this will open the file named config.txt, which is located in the /boot. So slash is the root of the file system, so this is where the file is located. Okay, and what you can do is use the arrows from the keyboard to navigate in the file. So you can use the down arrow to go down until the end of the file. Okay, at the end of the file you will see that line dt overlay vc4 etc etc. What you can do is add a hashtag before, so this will simply comment the line. Okay, and you can press Ctrl S. Okay, you will see that message here. Ctrl S will save the file, and then Ctrl X will exit the file. So now that we have changed that, as you can see, it's in boot directory, so you can guess that it will apply on boot. So you can now reboot your Raspberry Pi. So you have two choices now. You can do sudo reboot like we did before with SSH, and you can also go here and click on logout and shut down, just like you would shut down any computer. Okay, so if you want to actually reboot the Raspberry Pi, you have to click on reboot. Here I have clicked on shutdown. So what it will do is simply shut down the Raspberry Pi. And so you have to wait a few seconds. Let's say that when you shut down the Raspberry Pi like this, wait something like 10 to 20 seconds. After that, what you do is you take off the power cable from the Raspberry Pi, okay, and then you put the power cable back in the Raspberry Pi so it will boot again, okay? For now, this is the only solution you have to boot a Raspberry Pi. Is when it's shut down, is you take off the power cable and you put it back inside. So the Pi is now rebooting. You can wait again a few seconds or maybe up to 1 minute. Okay, and now the VNC client has connected again to the Raspberry Pi, and now it's much better. Okay, so you can go here and click on enter full screen mode. Okay, and now you have your Raspberry Pi full screen with the same resolution as your monitor, and you can click here to exit full screen. Okay, so great, you have set up everything. And one last very important thing is actually when you want to shut down and power off the Raspberry Pi, don't just take off the power cable when it's running. Okay, you just don't unplug your computer when it's running. Okay, first what you do is you go here, you shut down your computer, and then when it's completely shut down, you can remove the power cable. Okay, so if you don't do that, you may corrupt the SD card, and when you boot again, you might have an error, and in that case, you would have to completely reinstall your Raspberry Pi.